Welcome to the deep dive, where we take your sources, your questions, and your desire for real insight, and we unpack them to help you get well informed fast. Today, we're looking at a twist on a classic fable. You know, the one, the ant and the grasshopper. It really makes you think about the real point of all our hard work. We've all heard it. The ant works all summer, storing up for winter, while the grasshopper just plays his fiddle. The usual moral is, time for work, time for play. But here's the twist your sources are asking us to explore. When does the ant actually get to play?
That's really the heart of it, isn't it? This deep dive isn't about making your money grow, not primarily anyway. It's about making your life grow. It's all focused on how you can thrive, not just, survive. How to really optimize those positive life experiences.
Right. So our mission today, using this stack of really fascinating insights you've brought us, is to show you how to maximize fulfillment and minimize waste in your life. And this is especially for you if you're in that fortunate spot. Maybe you have enough money, health, free time to actually make real choices about how you use those resources. We really hope this chat gets you rethinking some basic assumptions about, how you're living. Let's dig in.
Okay. To really get the urgency here, let's start with something stark but, universal, time. And a story about Aaron and John. Back in October 2008, John, he was a successful lawyer, only 35, got this devastating diagnosis, aggressive clear cell sarcoma. Aaron talks about seeing his x-ray, and she described it as just lit up like a Christmas tree. The cancer had spread that much.
Wow, that's terrifying. Just completely overwhelming, coming out of nowhere like that.
It was. And faced with that, Aaron made a huge decision. She quit her job, just like that, to spend every possible moment with John and their 3 young kids. They focused on, simple pleasures, at home parks, movies, video games. And when his treatments took them to Boston, they used the time between appointments, exploring the city, historic tours, while he could still walk.
That must have been incredibly intense. What happened?
John died in January 2009. It was only 3 months after the diagnosis. Aaron said later she was just profoundly glad she'd quit her job, that she'd had that time with him.
That's heartbreaking. And it really does highlight a universal truth, doesn't it? The closer death seems, the more aware we are of time. Suddenly you're asking, what the hell am I doing? Why did I wait so long?
Exactly. Yeah. And here's the really counterintuitive part, something your sources really hammer home. This paradox of delayed gratification. I mean, on one hand, it's obviously foolish to live every day like it's your last. You wouldn't work or study or, go to the dentist. A certain amount of delaying makes sense. It pays off later. But the sad thing is, too many people delay gratification for too long, or maybe indefinitely. They save for experiences they never actually get around to having. And your sources argue this is just terribly short-sighted.
Okay, so if the default is save for a rainy day, and that's seen as a virtue, what's the core challenge to that? How do we go from that sense of urgency to something practical?
The insight is that time. Well, time is the only thing you can't get more of. You can always potentially earn more money, but you never get back a moment that's gone. So one source frames it like this. Life is basically an optimization problem. How do you maximize fulfillment while minimizing waste? And that's a universal question. It doesn't matter how much money you have.
That's a powerful reframe. Thinking of it as optimization. So if time is that scarce, what are the sort of guiding principles for solving this problem?
A few key ideas come up. First, some experiences are just time sensitive. You can't really water ski in your 90s, right? Or backpack through Europe with the same kind of energy. Second, and this is critical, the sources say squandering our lives should be a much greater worry than squandering our money. It's not about being reckless, but about really internalizing the fact that time is irreversible.
So the goal shifts then. It's not just about piling up wealth. It's about strategically turning that money into chosen experiences. Things that genuinely make you happy, whether that's travel or a hobby or splurging on family or charity. It's about making deliberate choices, getting off autopilot, making sure the ant actually gets to play.
Exactly. And that leads right into the timing aspect. Your ability to enjoy experiences, it changes drastically with age. I mean, think about it. How much does a toddler really get out of a fancy trip to Italy? Maybe a lifelong love of gelato, but probably not much else. Or the other end. How much fun is climbing Rome's Spanish steps when you're 90, assuming you can even do it?
Right. There's that quote, what good is wealth without health? It really sticks. So timing these experiences seems absolutely critical for, overall lifetime fulfillment. It's not just what you do, but when?
Precisely. And this brings up a really interesting point about wealth itself and how we use it. Your sources talk about this idea of honorary billionaires. people who spend like one, even if they aren't technically billionaires.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that most actual billionaires, well, they won't spend their fortunes in their lifetime. Like the 2,000 richest U.S. households, many of them elderly, they collectively donate only about 1% of their wealth each year. At that rate,
Sure.
they can't use it all up before they die.
Huh. So even someone like Bill Gates, despite giving away huge amounts, has seen his wealth almost double since 2010. He could have stopped paying work even earlier, maybe freed up more time. It sounds like life isn't a game of space invaders where you just rack up points or money in this case. The insight seems to be that so many people focus on maximizing wealth, but they don't give nearly as much thought to maximizing what they actually get from that wealth.
Spun on. And that's where this potentially life-changing idea comes in, what economists call consumption smoothing.
Mm.
One source tells this personal story. His first Wall Street job, earning only $18,000 a year, but he was proudly saving $1,000. His boss, this guy Joe Farrell, was apparently very blunt. He asked him something like, "Are you crazy to save that money? Your earnings power is going to happen."
Wow, that's direct, a real wake-up call. So consumption smoothing, what does that actually mean for someone, say, in their 30s right now? How does that change their strategy?
It means trying to even out your spending across your life, not just your income. The author realized, I was taking money away from my starving younger self to give to my future wealthier self, which is often completely backward. If you expect your income to go up a lot later, it might actually make more sense to spend a bit more now on those time-sensitive experiences and then save more aggressively later when you're earning more.
That idea got reinforced for the author by this book, Your Money or Your Life. Sounds like it really shifted his thinking on time and money. It introduced this concept of life energy, that money basically represents the hours of your life you spent working to get it. So spending, say, $8 literally means spending an hour of your life energy.
Yeah, it hits differently than just time is money, doesn't it? It's like that Matrix moment. Suddenly you're calculating the hours needed to buy stuff.
Hmm.
You see a shirt and think, wait, am I really going to work 2 hours just for that shirt? It forces you to be deliberate about every choice, to weigh the true cost.
And this also brings up those hidden costs, right? A higher salary might not mean a higher actual hourly wage if you factor in long commutes or expensive work clothes or just extra hours. All that eats into the time you have to enjoy the money. The author even had this cookie to treadmill calculation, like, is eating this cookie worth an extra hour on the treadmill? It forces you to make deliberate choices instead of just acting on impulse.
And what's really interesting here, and maybe a shift from some purely frugal thinking, is how much this deep dive emphasizes the value of experiences over possessions. Your sources say, sure, experiences don't have to cost a lot, but often the really memorable ones do. Big trip, concert tickets, learning a new skill, and this is explicitly called money well worth spending.
I'm curious, how does that focus on experiences fit with the frugality idea from Your Money or Your Life? What's the key difference?
Well, your money or your life often promotes frugality as a path to financial independence, to freedom. This deep dive kind of picks up from there and asks, okay, you've got some freedom, now what? And the answer it suggests is that the best way to use that freedom, to convert that life energy, is through experiences. Plus, psychological studies back this up. Spending on experiences tends to make us happier than spending on stuff. And unlike things that wear out or go out of style, experiences often gain value over time. They pay what your sources call a memory dividend.
A memory dividend. I love that phrase. So you get ongoing enjoyment just from remembering it. How does that dividend compound? What's the practical takeaway?
Well, they can even compound when you share the memory, right? Talking about it with others creates more connection, more positive energy. The practical takeaway is to start thinking about return on experience, not just financial return on investment, like the story about his friend Paulie, who was thinking about buying a vacation property. The advice wasn't just about the money, it was forget the equity for a second. Think about the return on experience, the bonding with kids, those irreplaceable memories.
And that really underlines the power of starting early, doesn't it? Like financial investments, experiences pay more dividends the earlier you invest. Even if you're, cash poor when you're young, you can still get huge enjoyment from low-cost experiences, like the author's friend Jason backpacking through Europe cheaply, or just free concerts, playing cards, exploring your own city. Sounds like the ant finally getting to play even early on.
It does. The real danger here is just living on autopilot. Adulthood gives you freedom to choose, but so many people default to habits like the daily latte without actively thinking about the true cost or the amazing alternatives they could be experiencing instead.
Which brings us squarely to this core philosophy running through the sources. Die with zero. It's a pretty radical idea, challenges a lot of conventional wisdom. The main insight seems to be avoiding the waste of unspent wealth, which is basically like working for free.
Exactly. Let me tell you about John Arnold, the energy trader who became a billionaire. He apparently set an initial target, maybe $15 million, but his numerical target kept shifting upwards, eventually past $4 billion. And he kept working, even though he didn't really love the job anymore, and his leisure time actually shrank.
So he worked way past the point of optimal utility of that money. The message is stark. If you spend hours and hours earning money and then die without spending it all, you've essentially needlessly wasted precious hours of your life. That phrase, working for free, really hits hard when you put it like that.
It does. Or think about Elizabeth. She left behind $130,000. If you calculate it out, that's something like 6,646 hours that Elizabeth worked for money she never got to spend. That's like 2.5 years of working for free. It's a tragic waste of life energy, of moments she could have used for experiences.
This sounds very much like that Nobel Prize winner Franco Modigliani and his life cycle hypothesis, right? The idea that to get the most enjoyment from your money over your life, your wealth should ideally decline to zero by the time you die. And if you don't know when that is, you plan for the maximum age you might live. What are the practical implications beyond just aim for zero?
The big implication is that financial planning shouldn't just be about accumulation. It needs to be about distribution across your life to maximize enjoyment. But the reality is, most people either save too much or save too little. They get caught by myopia, focusing too much on short-term rewards, or just inertia, finding it hard to change habits. Especially those responsible ants who've been saving diligently for decades, it's hard to suddenly switch gears and start spending later in life.
Okay, but what about the objections? The first one you always hear is, but I love my job. What's the perspective on that?
Even if you genuinely love your work, money you earn but don't spend is still wasted life energy. The source compares it to earning an extra life in a video game and then just throwing that extra life away.
Yeah. Your money represents your life energy however you got it. Once it's yours, the game is about maximizing the enjoyment you get from that energy. If the job adds joy, fantastic. But don't let it be an excuse to hoard resources you'll never use.
Right. The next big one is always, what about the kids? People want to leave an inheritance. So why does this die with zero idea challenge that? It's a really important point. The issue with many inheritances, according to your sources, is timing. The money often arrives too late for it to have maximum impact on the kids' lives. I mean, the median age for receiving an inheritance is around 60. Think about Virginia Collins' story. She struggled, really struggled near poverty, raising her kids, while her parents apparently had lots of money but held on to it. She eventually inherited $130,000 when she was 49. By then, it was, a nice bonus, but it wasn't the lifeline it would have been a decade or two earlier.
So it's not just giving, it's giving at the right time. That makes a lot of sense. And the source calls standard inheritance the 3 R's, random amounts of money at a random time to random people. Why is that seen as the opposite of caring? That sounds harsh.
It sounds harsh, but the point is it lacks intentionality. It's often driven by the parents' fear of running out or maybe just inertia, not necessarily what's best for the kids that moment. The die with zero approach says, be intentional, give before you die. This actually helps separate your money needs from your kids' money needs, freeing you up to spend yours without guilt. People like Virginia's dad, maybe shaped by the Depression, feared not having enough, even when they did. But things like long-term care insurance can help manage those fears about medical costs, and it costs far less than self-insuring by hoarding millions.
And it just makes intuitive sense that the peak utility of money for a child is probably somewhere between 26 and 35, not 60, right? That's when it can make the biggest difference. Education, starting a business, a down payment. Ultimately, your sources say your real legacy isn't money. It's the experiences you shared, especially when they were growing up, the memories, that whole poor little rich boy trope or the song Cats in the Cradle. They really capture that loss of shared time, which money later can't fix.
Absolutely. And interestingly, the same logic applies to charity. The message is, charity can't wait. Give while living, and ideally, the earlier the better. Take Sylvia Bloom, the secretary who secretly saved $8.2 million and donated it all after she died at 96. It seems selfless, right? But the argument is, you can't be generous when you're dead. Generosity implies a choice made while alive, with potential consequences for yourself. A will is just a legal instruction.
That's a really sharp distinction. So someone like Chuck Feeney, who gave away $8 billion during his lifetime, mostly anonymously, and now lives frugally, he's presented as a great role model for this giving while living idea. And it makes sense. Charities can always achieve more with money sooner because the needs, the suffering, it's happening now.
Hmm.
Okay, so we've covered avoiding autopilot, the urgency of time, the power of experiences, and this die with zero idea. Let's talk now about balancing and timing things more broadly. We heard Joe Farrell's advice, spend more when you're young. And your sources mention economists like Stephen Levitt and Milton Friedman actually argued for young people spending more, maybe even borrowing responsibly instead of scrimping so much.
Right. And the author admits he made the opposite mistake at one point, swinging from autopilot save to autopilot spend, just buying expensive things without really thinking about the value, which put his future at risk.
Yeah.
So the key is finding that sweet spot, right? Spending on what you truly value now while still saving smartly for the future you envision.
This is where those simple static rules, like the 50-30-20 rule, 50% needs, 30% wants, 20% savings, might fall short if your goal is maximizing lifetime fulfillment. It's good for basic stability, maybe, but your sources say you need a more sophisticated approach. Why doesn't a static savings rate work? How should that balance shift?
Well, saving a fixed 20% when you're young, especially if you expect your income to rise significantly, means you're potentially foregoing memorable life experiences you can only have then. The optimal balance shifts because, well, your ability to enjoy things changes, and even the value, the utility you get from each dollar changes over your lifetime. It might actually make sense to modestly and responsibly borrow when you're young. Not credit card debt for gadgets, but maybe for a high-impact experience if your future income looks much higher. This is because, generally speaking, a person's ability to extract enjoyment from their money starts to decline with age.
That grim deathbed scenario really hits this. Money is useless when your health is gone. It's nearly worthless at the very beginning and the very end of life, but it peaks somewhere in the middle, right? Maybe 20s through 50s. So, what's the practical takeaway from this declining utility of money for our planning?
The practical move is to strategically shift some spending from those older years to your younger years to maximize total lifetime enjoyment. This means your savings rate shouldn't be constant. You'll likely save more heavily during your peak earning years, and then plan to actively spend down later, not just keep accumulating forever.
What's really helpful here is thinking about those three pillars: health, free time, and money. They rarely line up perfectly, do they? Young people, lots of health and time, little money. Retirees, often time and money, but maybe less health. Middle years, maybe good health and money, but often a serious time crunch with work and family. What's the strategy for each stage then?
The core strategy is to trade what you have in abundance for what's scarce. So young people often trade their time for money. Older people might trade money for things that support their health or make life easier. And those in the middle, they should seriously consider trading money for time. And underlying all of this is the huge value of health. Nothing has a greater effect on your ability to enjoy experiences at any age than your health. It's truly more valuable than money because money can't fully buy back lost health.
How does that translate into something actionable for us right now, though?
Well, think about it practically. Even just 10 pounds of extra weight puts about 40 pounds of extra force on your knees. Over time, that leads to wear and tear, less mobility, and impacts your ability to enjoy activities. It's like negative compounding. But the flip side is positive. Look at Stephen Stern's story, the chiropractor, who, at 59, decided to reverse decades of neglect. He worked gradually, regained peak health for his age, and was able to summit mountains with his daughter. The point is, even small steps to improve your health now will have vastly increased your total experience points down the line. It's a crucial investment in your future ability to live fully.
And then there's time, which we often underestimate. The other big balancing act is to exchange money for free time, especially during those squeezed middle years. How can we do that?
It's about consciously paying for time-saving services. Maybe it's a cleaning service, a meal prep kit, using grocery delivery, even delegating more at work if you can. Anything that reduces that feeling of time pressure. Studies show it improves mood and frees you up for more positive experiences. You're literally buying back moments of your life.
I found this concept fascinating. The personal interest rate. The amount you'd need to be paid to delay an experience and how that rate rises with your age. Like a 20-year-old might delay a trip for a small incentive, but an 80-year-old's rate might be higher than 100% because the window is closing. How do we apply that?
It's like a grown-up version of the marshmallow test, the would you rather game. The mistake adults often make is choosing, say, 1.5 marshmallows 10 years later, when one now might be much better, especially if it's an experience. So you ask yourself, would I rather have one trip now or two trips exactly like it X years from now?
Mm-hmm.
This helps you decide if delaying is worth it, considering if the experience is repeatable and how much you'll enjoy it later. Generally, you lean towards delaying when younger and strongly avoid delays when older.
Okay, we've covered the philosophy, the mindset shifts. Now, let's get really practical. What are the tools for actually living this die with zero lifestyle? First up is time bucketing. What is that and why is it powerful?
It's basically a proactive planning tool. It starts with recognizing that, in a way, we all die a multitude of deaths throughout our lives. The teenager in you dies, the parent of an infant eventually dies as the child grows up, and so on. Experiences have these finite windows of opportunity. The analogy used is like different swimming pools at a resort: kiddie pool, teen pool, adult pool, senior pool. Each has rules, and once you move on, you can't really go back. Knowing this motivates you to make the most of the time you do have in each pool, like a tourist planning a short vacation.
And the tool itself sounds very hands-on. You draw a timeline from now until, well, the end. Divide it into 5 or 10-year chunks, time buckets. Then, without thinking about money initially, you list all the experiences you want to have and drop them into the ideal bucket. This feels really different from a reactive bucket list compiled when facing mortality. What do people usually notice when they do this exercise?
What most people find is that the experiences, especially the more physically demanding ones, tend to cluster in the younger buckets. The bell will probably skew to the left. Even when you factor money back in later, the vast majority of the experiences you want to have will have to happen within about 20 years of midlife in either direction, roughly say between 20 and 60. It really highlights those limited windows.
Which leads perfectly to the next tool, knowing your net worth peak. Your net worth usually grows for most of your working life. This peak is defined as the highest it should ever be before you start spending it down towards zero. Why is it a date tied to age and health, not just a dollar figure?
It's a date because your ability to use the money to convert it into enjoyable experiences declines with age and health. To figure this out roughly, you first need your survival threshold, the bare minimum you need saved to live on without any other income. A very rough calculation is 70% of the cost of 1 year to live, multiplied by the number of years you expect to live. So if you need $50 a year and expect to live 20 more years, that's $1 million total need, maybe a $700 survival threshold. Once your savings exceed that threshold, you can, in theory, start carefully spending down the excess. Things like annuities can help manage the risk of living longer than expected.
Okay, so given all that, when should this peak ideally happen for most people?
Well, simulations mentioned in the sources suggest that for many people, the optimal time for net worth to peak is somewhere between the ages of 45 and 60. Waiting much longer than that often means you'll likely die with more than zero, which implies missed experiences.
But what if, back to our earlier point, I love my job part 2, if you hit your calculated peak, but you genuinely love working, you don't just have to quit, right? What's the key then?
No, you don't have to quit. The key is you need to ramp up your spending accordingly to avoid wasting the money you continue to earn. The culture's focus on money can be like a seductive drug, making you forget you actually wanted experiences. Money earned past your peak, if it just piles up, is effectively wasted life energy. Think of Andy Schwartz, the entrepreneur who loves his work. The advice isn't stop working, it's start spending significantly more now on non-work things, explore new interests, maybe look into phase retirement.
The challenge, though, must be psychological. This idea of deaccumulation, actually spending down wealth after decades of saving. Old habits die hard. How do people get over that hump?
It's tough. The main thing is constant reinforcement. Every dollar you don't spend at the right time will have far less value to you later.
And actively investing in health becomes even more critical here. Like Tia, 57, who redesigned her job and took up resistance training, swimming, spin classes. That proactive health investment directly changes her current and future life experiences by ensuring she can do things. And it makes sense to rebucket your life plan periodically, maybe every 5 or 10 years. Your interests change, life happens. Especially as you approach that peak, you need a plan for retirement activities to avoid feeling adrift.
Exactly. And the final piece of practical advice is about being bold and conquering fear. Specifically, embracing asymmetric risk situations where the potential upside is huge and the downside is relatively small or manageable. The argument is sometimes it's actually riskier not to make the bold move because of the potential for lifelong regret.
And the logic is the younger you are, the bolder you should be. Why is that?
Because you have more time to recover if things go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You can reload and reload.
Mm.
The author shows his own story. Getting fired at 23, taking a chance on a broker job, eventually succeeding as a trader. Even if he'd failed, he argues, he'd have the memories and the pride of having tried.
Like Christine, 25, quitting a job she hated without another one lined up. The sources show her realizing the downside was not as bad as she imagined, and that young, she could afford to take a lot of risk. It's about trying to quantify the fear. If you're scared to move for a job, actually analyze how much time you really spend with current friends' family. Often, you can maintain ties and gain huge new adventures. The author's moved to Texas for trading techs. He didn't love the idea of Texas initially, but the desire for potential riches, the high upside, outweighed the low downside.
And being bold when you're older looks different. It might mean having the courage to finally spend the money you saved, or walking away from a long career if it's no longer fulfilling. Everyone's risk tolerance is different, of course, but the key message is don't underestimate the risk of inaction. Fear often blows it out of proportion. The absolute worst-case scenario is probably not as bad as you think.
Wow. We've covered a huge amount today. And the core message from your sources really gives you an impossible task, doesn't it? To die with exactly zero. Let's be real, you probably won't hit it perfectly. You'll likely have a bit left over, or maybe undershoot slightly.
Right. But the true purpose isn't hitting zero exactly. It's that aiming for it will forever change your autopilot focus, from earning and saving and maximizing your wealth to living the best life you possibly can. It's like trying to be virtuous. You won't be perfect, but the act of striving itself gets you much closer to the ideal life you want.
So the call to action is clear. Don't wait until your health and life energy start to fade. Start chasing those memorable life experiences now, especially the ones with a time limit. Think about giving money to your kids when it can actually help them most, not just as an afterthought. And if you're charitably minded, give while you're alive to see the impact.
Remember, at the end of the day, the business of life really is the acquisition of memories. So what are you waiting for? How are you going to help your aunt finally get out and play?